Let's now switch focus to what we're going to be debating tonight. This is with respect to questions being asked regarding the government of India for having once again been seen in dragging its feet in setting up a Lokpal. A Lokpal, which is an anti-graft watchdog to cover all categories of public servants. The Supreme Court in the past has given several deadlines to the government, and once again, in another deadline, it has set February end this year as the last date to the central government to get that meeting together and appoint a Lokpal. But once again, questions being asked that is there a lack of political will to appoint this ombudsman? If the government today continues to say that it has an impeccable track record of no corruption in the past 4 years, how do we know that? Wouldn't a Lokpal help us ascertain exactly that? So why this reluctance or this delay that we've seen ever since the bill was signed into law and the first meeting was held 2014 onwards?
On the debate tonight, 5 years since the Lokpal bill became a law, but our netas have failed to implement it. Now once again the top court steps in, giving a deadline to the centre to appoint an ombudsman.
The Supreme Court CJI-led bench has now put a time frame for the selection panel to complete its task of impaneling suitable candidates for selection to the post of Lokpal. This has happened in the backdrop of several contentious appointments being stuck, and Prashant Bhushan this time around raising concern before the CJI-led bench, which also led to Honourable Chief Justice of India taking a slight dig at Prashant Bhushan, asking him to view things more positively.
So why has a Lokpal still not been appointed? The centre has argued that in the absence of a leader of opposition in parliament, the selection committee could not be constituted. Lokpal is something that India united for to end corruption, and the tallest leaders from prominent political parties, including the BJP, swore to enforce it. Mirror now asks, 5 years since the Lokpal bill became a law, why doesn't India still have a Lokpal? Let's debate.
Yes, let's throw this open to our panelists tonight. We have Bhaskar Ghosh of the BJP, Muhammad Khan, spokesperson of the Congress, Preeti Menon, spokesperson of the Aam Aadmi Party, whose leader, of course, was one of the prominent faces to have spearheaded the anti-corruption campaign, Anjali Bharadwaj, who's the co-convener of the NCPRI, which is the National Campaign for People's Right to Information, Jaiprakash Narayan, who's the founder of Lok Sakta, and Vinay Tiwari, consulting editor with the Times Network. Let's make a start here with respect to, if we take into consideration of what we as the people have been missing for the past 4.5, 5 years. If we don't have a Lokayukta in place in respective states, some states of course have gone ahead and appointed it. If we don't have a Lokpal in place in the centre, what are we missing out? What information are we missing out as a nation, as the people who played a pivotal role in that anti-corruption campaign, which pushed the government, UPA 2, in the year 2013 to eventually pass this bill in both houses of parliament and sign it into law? Let's get in Anjali to answer that. Anjali, help us put this in perspective for our viewers. While the Supreme Court has once again extended the deadline and giving more time to the government to appoint the Lokpal in the centre, what are we missing out here?
Look, the demand for a Lokpal, the anti-corruption ombudsman, was because there was need for an independent and empowered body to look into cases of corruption of government functionaries, especially at the highest level. Now, when the BJP was in opposition, they were completely in agreement that there was a dire need for a Lokpal. And in fact, the BJP came to power on the plank of corruption, and people had hoped that there would be a strong working Lokpal, independent Lokpal that would be set up. Unfortunately, in the last 4.5 years, we've seen that there is absolutely no political will on the part of the government to set up the Lokpal. It's been 4.5 years. We haven't seen anyone appointed as the Lokpal so far. We filed RTI applications and we have found that the government did not hold a single meeting of the selection committee for 45 months, more than 4 years. And the only time that they held the first meeting was in March 2018, which was after a contempt petition was filed in the Supreme Court because the government was refusing to appoint or take steps to appoint a Lokpal. Now, what do people miss out if the Lokpal is not set up? The issue is that the government keeps saying that there is no corruption. That's all very well to say when there is no proper body, independent body, which works without fear or favor and investigates into allegations of corruption. Now, issues like the Rafale, the allegations under the Sahara Birla diaries, for example, banking fraud that has taken place in our country, all of these should have been things that should have been investigated by an independent Lokpal, which could have worked independently of the government without any influence. We already had the CBI, which was the Supreme Court itself said was like a caged parrot, and we needed an independent body to look into these cases of corruption. Unfortunately, that body has not been set up. The government can keep giving itself a clean chit, but that's not how proper anti-corruption framework can work. The government should not be the one passing judgment on itself. It should be the Lokpal, which should have powers. And in fact, the Lokpal law, when it was being drafted, and members of civil society had demanded that the Lokpal must have powers to sanction investigation, to sanction prosecution in cases of corruption. The Lokpal has not been set up, and the government has pushed through amendments to the Prevention of Corruption Act, taking into its own hands the power to sanction investigation and prosecution into cases of corruption. Now, can you imagine if there are allegations of corruption against senior ministers, against the Prime Minister or any other senior functionary? Isn't there a conflict of interest? How will and why will the government give permission to go ahead and investigate and prosecute? So this entire problem, we know that corruption is a huge problem in our country, down to the lowest level and above. And this needed to be tackled. Unfortunately, we've seen no political will by this government to do that.
All right. And there are, of course, certain state governments of different political parties also who haven't appointed. There are just a handful of state governments that have appointed their Lokayukta, as they're called, in the state here. Let's get in a view here from Mr. Jayaprakash Narayan. Jayaprakash, would it be fair to say that the government is wanting to hide something, or is this really just a procedural delay? Because you need an LOP being part of that committee to appoint the Lokayukt in the Lokpal in the center. And technically speaking, we don't have an LOP.
The government's response, Seher, is entirely perfunctory. It is very half-hearted and very cynical. For instance, the selection committee issue, the law clearly states that if there is a vacancy in selection committee, that does not constitute an adequate ground to delay or deny the selection process. 2, nothing prevented the government from promulgating an ordinance immediately after resuming power, once they realized that there is no formal leader of opposition, giving that role to the leader of the largest party in the Lok Sabha. And therefore, to now claim that because of that one slight problem of not having a 5th member of a 5-member selection panel, you could not appoint Lokpal is absolutely perfunctory, cynical, half-hearted, unacceptable. As you said, and as Anjali said, it doesn't matter whether the government is honest or dishonest. That's immaterial. We as citizens are entitled to have an independent process that can certify. Self-certification will not do. Take Rafael case. Now, the opposition claims that there is serious malfeasance. The government says there's nothing of the kind. I do not know who is right. But if only Lokpal had investigated that, even at preliminary stage, if there's no evidence whatsoever, they could have dismissed out of hand and said, look, there is absolutely no credible information or evidence to suggest that there is any malfeasance, or if there's any investigation could have proceeded. Take the CBI. There are so many allegations about autonomy of the CBI being compromised. Last few months have been entirely agog with that all over the country. Now, the Lokpal Act clearly says, insofar as the CBI acts as an investigative arm of Lokpal, to that extent, it functions under the Lokpal's jurisdiction. And two, the Act also says under Section 38, any complaints or allegations of corruption in the CBI or CVC shall be the jurisdiction of the Lokpal. Now, if the body is constituted, that could have been set right. By not having Lokpal, we are proving ourselves to be an extremely cynical country, uncaring about corruption in high places, political or bureaucratic, except as an electoral issue to garner the political dividends in the short term. This whole issue of Lokpal has come out in the current form. It came up with the first Administrative Reforms Commission. Later, the second commission of which I was a member, we recommended very strongly. Later, on the 2G spectrum case, 2009-10, when that came out, the Lokpal demand gained a lot of popularity. 2011, there was a big civil society movement. And 2011, end of 2011, the government introduced a bill, there was a major debate. Then went to the parliamentary committee. Finally enacted law in 2013.
Absolutely.
On the first day of 2014,
given that this was also essentially...
The president assented. Today, 5 years have passed.
Yes, we understand the timeline that you're trying to get us here. But given the fact that this was also primarily driven by a large people's movement that started and spread across various cities, Vinay, do you feel that there is as much outrage today, or even we as a people today think that once the bill has been passed, the government would eventually appoint a Lokpal? Let's be patient about that. Should that be the case here, or should we be as outraged as we were during that movement in 2011?
So there are three aspects here, and I'm afraid, however much we want to sound a little optimistic on a Friday evening, I will have to strike a very, very cynical note. And I'll tell you something. I mean, most of the points that Jayaprakash and Anjali are saying are right, but the only difference that I have is this issue is not about the government at all. Like it or not, there is complete unanimity in the entire political class that they don't want to be policed, irrespective of the party affiliations, no matter where you are. Even today, 4.5 years after the Lokpal bill was passed, 13 states still haven't even moved to appointing a Lokayukt, which is part of the original law. Whether it is the BJT in Orissa, whether it's the governments in Northeast, whether it's West Bengal, whether it's so irrespective of political backgrounds, the fact of the matter is nobody wants to be policed. Part A. Part B, Jayaprakash referred to that since 1961, when the first Administrative Reforms Commission came in under Morarji Desai, till now 9 attempts were actually made to bring in the Lokpal. It finally happened only in 2013. They've always been united, they will always remain so. However, the only point of divergence I have is I think we have a slightly romanticized approach towards solving the corruption problem. I really do believe corruption is such an intrinsic part of our culture, because there is a beneficiary and there is a person who will give you that benefit. It's such a lovely nexus between them that even if you go by statistical data in the states which actually have good and functional Lokayuks, like for instance Karnataka, which perhaps is the most functional Lokayuk comparatively, see the number of complaints that actually come and then see the number of complaints that actually get effectively solved or resolved. The only other point I want to add to this is I think probably this is the time when we need to start separating big ticket, high profile, headline grabbing corruption cases from retail corruption that people face every single day. Unfortunately, a lot of headline space gets taken in by Rafael of the world. Not enough is talked about at the local level, which citizens face virtually every single day. And the intention of the government, you can see clearly, even that has been diluted even after the Lokpal bill has been filed. Even last year, the government has diluted those provisions in the law. So there is a unanimity in the political class here, and I don't see anything positive coming out of it.
But Vinay, what does this mean? Even if you talk about Karnataka perhaps having one of the strongest Lokayuktas, or perhaps being one of the first to have appointed one, there are still cases that really don't see their conclusive end. Does this mean that despite all the checks and balances, this remains toothless? Even if you have a Lokpal or a Lokayukta, there are ways that you can work around them?
So there are three problems, Seher, and I'm going by conduct on record. These are all facts. In Karnataka, for instance, despite having a comparatively stronger Lokayukt, the government introduced a new department called the Anti-Corruption Bureau. And a lot of people, in fact, that matter has now gone to the court, where people are saying that the ACB is almost encroaching upon the powers of the Lokayukt. So there is an attempt backhand to dilute that, number one. Number two, Justice Tahiliani, who heads the Maharashtra Lokayukt, who's the Maharashtra's Lokayukt, has gone on record many times to say that 70% or more than 70% of the cases that he actually gets are about maladministration and not about corruption at all. The trouble is that one, you have a problem of people not exactly coming out or feeling scared of coming out against the government class because it enjoys way too much power. I mean, once you complain against a government officer, even if it's about corruption, you can be rest assured you will be targeted and targeted like nobody's business. I mean, that they'll come down with a ton of bricks. You're never going to breathe easy after that. So people are reluctant to complain. The whistleblowers bill was supposed to give that immunity to provide people from complaining about it. But the point is, there is one other aspect, Seher, and I'm sure you will come to this in the later half of the show, is after the CBI fiasco, and remember the CBI chief, the current CBI chief was the outcome of a panel choosing him. The question is, no matter how many people you have in a panel, can you find somebody today in this country who can actually be above probity in all aspects? I mean, once you occupy the post, there are all kinds of allegations that are thrown around. You really don't have trust in any institution or any individual left anymore. You have just decisions of the Supreme Court being questioned by people. There are collegium decisions being questioned by people.
Right. Right. That's of course well pointed out on how eventually it is really working on ground in some of those states where there has been an appointment here. Let's get in the Aam Aadmi Party. Preeti, would you like to take that point further ahead, that there are attempts of even diluting the powers of the Lokayukta in the states that have been appointed? For instance, let's look at the Delhi government here. And you have the leader, the Chief Minister, Arvind Kejriwal, who was one of the faces of that movement along with Anna Hazare, spearheading that movement, eventually having the UPA 2 government here by the end of their term and passing that bill into law. But the Delhi government today itself is at loggerheads with their Lokayukta.
So, Sir, what I'd like to say over here is that since 1956, the citizens of India have been demanding a Lokpal bill. And successfully, the UPA and the NDA governments have managed to keep it at bay. Today, the problem is that the government that is incumbent, the government that is ruling, came into power on an anti-corruption plank. It came into power supporting the demand for a Jan Lokpal, supporting the demand for the Lokpal. So their betrayal is all the more shocking for most citizens of India because they committed. And as my colleagues here on the panel have pointed out, that the selection committee didn't meet. And we've heard ridiculous statements like there was no room and there were no tables and chairs and there was no infrastructure. It's also very disappointing that there is no leader of the opposition to represent or somebody. Mr. Kharge has attended other meetings like appointment of the CBI director or his dismissal. So why could he have not attended this meeting? And as somebody pointed out, even if he was missing, it did not stop the working of the meeting. Coming to the Delhi government, the Delhi has a Lokayukt and there are complaints consistently made against the Delhi government. Not one of them has been proven right, but we are attending those complaints. We are not afraid. So why is the Narendra Modi government so afraid? Let there be a Lokpal, let people complain, and if you have nothing to worry about, just like the Delhi government, you will never be accused of anything. I mean, you will never be convicted of anything. So today, lots of people do complain in the Delhi Lokayukt. At least they have a place where they can voice their grievance against the government or their allegation of corruption. Whether what justice comes out of it all depends on the power of the Lokpal. So coming to that main point, the Delhi government resigned the first term because we could not pass the Jan Lokpal, a stringent law which, like my colleagues have pointed out, had whistleblowers protection, had a citizens charter. In the second term, the moment we came into power, we immediately passed the Jan Lokpal bill in Delhi, which allows the Lokayukt to have stronger powers, to have investigative powers, to be able to protect the whistleblowers.
But today when you have the Lokayukta sending you a notice to some of the MLAs, which mostly are AAP MLAs because of the presence that AAP has in the Delhi Assembly, you're accusing him. Today when you have the Delhi Lokayukta send a notice to about 66 MLAs, almost all of them belonging to AAP, with respect to not filing their, making their assets public, you're accusing the Lokayukta.
We are not accusing the Lokayukt at all. We are saying that we are happy that they are making complaints, but not on a single complaint has any of the MLAs been found actually guilty of corruption. You remember that in Delhi's case, 21 MLAs were arrested by the Delhi police, and 19 of them those cases have been dismissed by the court on various other grounds. So Aam Aadmi Party is used to persecution. We are used to fake cases by the Delhi police. We are used to the election commission going ahead and dismissing our MLAs, and yet we find that justice always stands by us. So we are not afraid of the complaints made in the Lok Ayukt.
All right. So you're saying that you fought it in court here, despite the Lok Ayukta coming up with those allegations. So let's get in the Congress. Yes, we got the AAP's perspective on this. Mohammad Khan, please respond here with respect to your own leader, Mallikarjun Kharge, who's attended the selection meeting, who was in fact called to attend the selection meeting, and only because he was not cited as an LOP. He was called as a special invitee. He skipped that meeting. Yes, why?
Yes, sir. I had the privilege of advising him on that as well. But let's take this one by one. First, let's talk about the BJP's position on this. I think Anjali ma'am has masterfully laid out the entire summary of the last 4 years and their approach to it. The absence of any meetings in the last 45 months, the citing of absurd reasons which are not correct, and now this absurd argument that the act needs to be amended because there's no leader of opposition. Now, let me tell you something. As one of your panelists pointed out, they could have brought in an ordinance if they were truly serious. But here's what they did instead. The language of the Delhi Special Police Establishments Act, which was the same as that of the Lokpal, was changed by way of an amendment. They brought in an amendment to change that because they didn't want to stall the appointment of the CBI director. So why couldn't they bring in the same amendment then? Please look it up. Mr. Kharge wrote to them at that time saying that very, very well and good that you're amending it for the CBI appointment. Now do it for the Lokpal. Now let's come to the question of him being invited as a special invitee. I think it is a fantastic thing that he did not go.
Right.
He would not participate in the murder of democratic institutions because the status of special invitee was given to him after the Supreme Court said convene this meeting. And do you know what the role of a special invitee is, Seher? We checked. We have no voting powers. What are they calling us for? If they're going to carry out a facade and appoint someone who is pliable or one of their people, then what are you calling us for exactly? Give us the powers promised to us under the statute. That is the very basic we can demand. Now let's come to the Aam Aadmi Party very quickly.
No, but Mohammad Khan, you can't ask to be invited. You can't ask for your leader to be invited as an LOP, the leader of opposition, when you don't have those numbers in the Lok Sabha. That's your fault.
If you do not have, we are not asking to be invited as a leader. Seher, you've misunderstood me. Seher, you've misunderstood me. Don't invite us as leader of opposition. That position has been settled. Just like you did in the CBI Act. Amend it. Say, call the leader of the single largest party in opposition. You've changed the language in the CBI Act. Change the language here as well. That's all we're asking. Don't recognize us as leader of opposition if you don't want to. Again, now let's come to the Aam Aadmi Party. Unfortunately, the Aam Aadmi Party's record in this is dubious and test, and I'll tell you why. We followed the proceedings in the Delhi Assembly when the passage of the Lokpal bill as designed by the Aam Aadmi Party was taking place. Take that bill out. Compare it to the bill that they put before the public. Take it out and compare it to the bill they put before the public. They have vastly stripped that bill. Anyone can go and analyze it right now. What did they do those 2 days when the Delhi Assembly met? Their legislator after legislator, and of course it is their right to do so, stood and patted themselves on the back of on a historic victory. Pull out those videos and watch them. They didn't discuss the provisions of the Lokpal Act. Every single one of them spoke about कैसे लोगों ने सोचा था हम नहीं आएंगे, हम आ गए. You know, they ठीक है, well and good.
You know, this is such an absurd take that Mohammed is taking in this argument that I really have to interrupt.
But I'll say one thing.
No, let's look at the states then. Okay, Mohammed, I'm going to go bit by bit with respect to the states also, with respect to the Congress party in power in the states where you don't have a Lok Ayukta.
Mohammed, for 50 years.
We need to get in a word here from the BJP. I need to get in a word from all our panelists first. Preeti, hold that thought, please. Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh, who's been listening to everyone very patiently.
But I would like to respond to Mohammed, the Congress which kept the Lokpal away for 50 years.
We're going to come down to state by state in just a bit. We're going to come down to the Lok Ayuktas in just a bit. I need to get in a view here from the BJP. Preeti, Mohammed, please hold your thoughts. Hold your thoughts, please. Let's get in a word here from Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh of the BJP. Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh, the allegation here being that the central government for the past 4.5 years. Preeti, you cannot be heard, please. The central government, the BJP-led NDA government in the centre, past 4.5 years has done nothing. It was a very active part of the anti-corruption campaign that eventually led to the bill being passed, but has done nothing about it when in power, when it's in a position to appoint a Lokpal.
Well, I think I was just hearing all my panelists that, okay, especially the Congress and the AAP, they are just dumping the entire thing on BJP. Now let me give you the entire schedule that how the Lokpal bill was passed. The bill was prepared on 4th of August 2011. Lok Sabha passed in 27 December 2011, placed in Rajya Sabha on 29th of December 2011, referred to Select Committee on 21st May 2012, passed in Rajya Sabha on 17 December 2013, and passed
Mr. Bhaskar
in Lok Sabha
Ghosh,
on
what
18
good is
December
that?
2013. So it should
Mr.
take
Bhaskar
12
Ghosh, we know the
years,
timeline. We're also playing out
And
part of
now-
the timeline for
now,
our viewers
when it
on
came
screen.
to- when
And a
it-
lot of our
when
viewers
it-
have been part of this anti-corruption movement as well. I'm
No,
talking
I'm
about
just
today.
coming to the point.
Supreme Court, once again, in a stern word, has extended the deadline for the central government.
Right.
Why has the central government
And-
not appointed the Lokpal, is my question, please.
Fine. After that, what the step the government is taken, please allow me to speak for what the step the government has taken. The government after that had formed a committee to nominate the search committee. There's a search committee which was created to nominate the members of the Lokpal committees. And in that particular committee, Mallikarjun Kharge is a special invitee because Congress has left a lot of fallacies in the Lokpal bill because they have hurriedly, without adequate examining, they have really passed it. Because of lack of leader of opposition, a Lokpal selection board selection panel cannot be formed. Now there is an amendment done by our government that even the leader of the largest opposition party should be inducted. Even after this opposition, when we invited Mallikarjun Kharge ji, he on March 1st, on April 10, on July 19, on August 21, September 4 and September 19. So many times he has refused to decline to come as a special invitee. Now the question is that this Congress always do this, pressure tactics by dumping everything on the hands on the shoulder of
Why are you
NDA.
inviting him as
No,
a
but
special
then
invitee?
why
we are
call
just
him as a
one
special
step
invitee when he
behind.
has no voting powers?
We are just one step
Why call
behind
him
of
as a special
appointing
invitee when he has no voting powers?
Sorry?
Why call him as a special invitee when he has no voting powers? How do you call him for a meeting with respect to appointing a CBI director?
Because
You call him as the leader of the largest opposition party.
Part of the discussions. Yeah, that is why we invited as a special invitee.
Discussion, is he serious?
Because the provision is not maintained in the law which has
We
been
are not
passed by
going
the
to
Congress.
participate in a murder of democracy with you. We are not going to participate in a proceeding that undermines the very basis of which the Lokpal Act was passed. What an absurd statement to make. Come and participate in discussions.
No, whatever we do, you think there is a matter of democracy, and whatever you do, when it's a fallacious, fine, we have to accept
Okay,
it.
Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh, do we see this being resolved? Okay, we're looking at already mid-January now. Do we see this being resolved in 1.5 months?
Under the
Your
chairmanship of
deadline extended by the Supreme Court is 28th Feb. Okay, several steps taken. All right, we get that, Mr. Ghosh. By 28th Feb.
Now that
Will
is
we
why
have a
we have
Lokpal in the
submitted to
centre?
Supreme Court that formation of a search committee is a very, very, very critical process.
Okay.
I don't think he has
So
any
how
clue
long
what
will
he's
that
talking
take?
about. The truth is that ultimately you delayed it till the very last point. Now,
Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh,
the
how long
model
will
code of
that
conduct is
take?
about to come into force. Of course, it will not be operationalized.
No. Let me get that answer from Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh. Single question here, Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh, in what the Supreme Court has just said.
Yeah.
28th Feb is the next extended deadline. Get the Lokpal by 28th Feb. Do we see that happening?
Yeah, our representative in the Supreme Court, the lawyers, they have told that it's a very critical process. So we have asked for some more time. But if Supreme Court has put a deadline, we have to do that within that time.
Anjali, would you like to explain this to us? We've seen multiple deadlines that have been given by the Supreme Court in the past as well, with the government of India saying that these this is procedure that needs to be followed, and we're not being able to get the right kind of people, perhaps to get that meeting, to get the committee, to finally appoint the Lokpal. But do you think there should really be multiple deadlines on this? What is the other way out?
Look, let me first try and explain what this whole leader of opposition, what all of this implies. When I said that there was need for an independent body to investigate into cases of corruption, and which is independent of the government and does not have undue government control or interference, what does that mean? That means that the government should not have an unbalanced role, a preponderance, while selecting the Lokpal. Right. Now, for that, the selection committee of the Lokpal had to be a balanced one, which could not have a preponderance of government. So, the selection committee in the Lokpal had 5 members: the Prime Minister, the Speaker, the Leader of Opposition, the Chief Justice of India or his nominee, and the 4 of them had to come together in a balanced way and select an eminent jurist. Now, since there was nobody recognized as a leader of opposition, to have a balance first, they should have passed an amendment or brought in an ordinance, and they should have made sure that the leader of the single largest party came into the selection committee for the spirit of the Lokpal to be maintained. It was not done. Without the leader of opposition, the majority was that of the government in the selection committee. They went ahead and selected the 5th person who had to be the eminent jurist. Now we have a selection committee which has a preponderance of the government, and they are going to select the Lokpal. The Supreme Court has been left with no choice. Right. See, it is not that there is no bill that has been passed to amend the Lokpal. All that has happened is that the bill that was needed to be passed has not been passed. Yeah. So, therefore, we now have a situation where the government majority selection committee is going to decide the Lokpal, which means that to begin with, the spirit of the Lokpal has been questioned, it's been crushed. And I think in all of this, the losers are the citizens of the country who had demanded an independent Lokpal. Now, let me just make
and this is what we fought for and demanded. Vinay, do you see this happening?
As it may.
Vinay, do you see this happening by the end of February?
Go ahead and make the appointment.
Does the Supreme Court have other options? Can things be taken in their hands? Is there any other body which has the powers to push this ahead? Because these are multiple deadlines. Let's not forget, this is not the first time that a deadline has been extended. Multiple deadlines given, and this is the next deadline. So, Vinay, do we see this happening by the end of Feb?
No, sir, look, the Supreme Court, of course, has the authority to push the governments to come up and do that. But remember, we are 45 days away from an election being announced. We are in a situation where the government is not, once the election is announced, it's a lame duck government. Really, they really can't take any decisions. It's never going to happen. Believe you me, this is not going to happen simply because, and I'll tell you why. Look, the trouble is that we have 3 politicians on our panel, and I can understand their problem. Corruption is just a tool for grandstanding. Please understand that. Nobody wants to fix it for the simple reason that the bedrock of politics is corruption. You cannot be in politics. Do you see checks being issued when you have to carry out campaigns and election rallies? Nothing happens in check, right? This is not the way it works. That industry doesn't work that way. And this is not about one party. Every single party has to do that because that's how it works. Now, there are multiple issues involved. There are issues of political funding. There is an issue of state-sponsored elections, state funding, all kinds of issues.
I do object. Our government...
Right.
It's not about the government, sir. I'm talking about all political parties.
No, Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh, that's right.
You misheard me. I have said every single political party has a vested interest in keeping this away. And the evidence comes from the way they've treated it at the Lokayukt level, because there are various parties ruling various states.
I'd like to come in here.
Okay, no, very quickly first, I apologize. We'll have to take in one of our viewers calling in. Sudhir Pandey, Mr. Sudhir Pandey from Mumbai, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for giving me a chance to talk. Actually, what I would like to say, these politicians, these leaders, Prime Minister, Chief Minister, others, they come, after a lot of efforts, they become MLAs, MPs and ministers. And they would never like to have a, person who is monitoring their goods and bad things. So in BJP was there in Gujarat for 5 years. They never appointed any Lokayukta, and 4.5 years have passed. Had they been so honest, they would never mind to keep a monitor on them who can check the discrepancies and all that. One is in power; he wants to enjoy the power in absolute terms. So I very much doubt the intentions of government when sort of ill practices are going on. What we have seeing in the CBI and other departments.
Okay.
It will be very difficult for them. That's all. Thanks.
All right, so we appreciate you calling us in, and that's a very simple understanding of anyone in the country, or one of our viewers or anyone in the country here, that those in power, of course, would not like to be scrutinized. They're in power, they want to be enjoying that power, corruption or not, they do not want to be scrutinized. Mr. Jayaprakash Narayan, should we then be looking at perhaps more stringent measures be part of the Lokpal law here? Was it watered down when it was made into a law?
Absolutely.
It's a reasonably strong Lokpal, I forget your name, my apologies, Seher.
No, that's
there are
right,
some deficiencies, certainly. For instance, the section 6A of the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act should have been repealed. For instance, section 197 of the CRPC should have been repealed. That is about prosecution, prior sanction of the government being required. Though in case of Lokpal, you require the prior sanction of Lokpal, wherever Lokpal is investigated or inquired into the matter. But Lokayukta does not have the same powers under this law. Lokayukta has no control over the ACB, as opposed to Lokpal having control at least to some extent over the CBA, etc. So the law itself is not too bad.
Right.
There are some
but
improvements
Mr. Jayaprakash,
necessary.
we're talking in terms of the
That I
helplessness.
can guarantee. I have studied it carefully.
Not with respect to the powers after you're appointed. We're at a very initial stage of just the appointment. So we're talking about the helplessness that we've seen with the government here today in perhaps, as some would feel, being stubborn and appointing the Lokpal to begin with.
Sadly, Vinay is right in the sense that there is really no genuine desire, no passion in the political executive or in the legislature. I am not one of those who debunks politicians or political process. I believe political process is noble. They have very complex challenges. We must be respectful of that. While being respectful, governance is not about what politicians who are elected want. It is about a system of checks and balances and a system of accountability. That I as Prime Minister, as a Minister or MLA, MP want it is irrelevant. The people of India, at least notionally, are supreme and sovereign, and every constitutional functionary must be accountable to the people of India by a variety of means, including Lokpal itself. Lokpal is not, again, a monarch. Lokpal can be removed by a process. So unless we understand this and respect the process and design it, the whole political system is losing credibility. Right now, unfortunately, they prefer to lose credibility rather than to do the right thing for the country. And this government, we all expected a lot because after all, Modi government came to power on this platform of anti-corruption. But unfortunately,
yes, it is the process that has been disrespected. Preeti, you wanted to step in.
Vinay made some important points.
Okay.
Very briefly.
I think what's very important to bring back the whole debate to is the fact that...
I would only submit to all of you.
Should I continue?
May I?
Okay, let's go ahead. Preeti, you've been holding on for a long time here. Coming. No, Mr. Jayaprakash, coming to you in just a bit.
It's a necessary condition.
Right, it is a necessary condition and we still don't have it here. Preeti, please go ahead.
There are many things to be done. For instance, competition and choice.
I would just like to bring back the debate back to the door of the BJP. This is a party that is here with a brute majority. And it has behaved and done things exactly as it pleased to. When it suited them, it has followed Supreme Court judgments. When it did not suit them, like in Sabrimala, it has gone against Supreme Court judgments. It has always managed to drive its agenda very successfully. So clearly the Lokpal is not on the agenda of the BJP at all, and that is what we must all be debating about right now, that the party cheated us. They've been in power for 4.5 years now. They came on an anti-corruption plank. They said Chaukidar hai, but the Chaukidar has himself not appointed the real Chaukidar, which is the Lokpal.
Alright, so Preeti, but what have you done? What has your party done? You've of course appointed it in Delhi where you are in power. Mohammad Khan, come in here on this because we'd like to very quickly go state by state here if possible, at least to begin with a few.
I will say.
You have no right to
All
say
right,
this
Mr.
forum
Bhaskar
about
Ghosh.
the corruption.
Yeah.
You are the
So,
headquarter
sir,
of
as
corruption.
the
Yeah,
Aam
Sahar,
Aadmi
can
Party
I come in?
government in Delhi did.
No,
are the
Mr.
headquarters
Bhaskar
of
Ghosh,
corruption.
questions being asked specifically on the
If
Lokayukta.
Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh is done heckling.
We don't know about corruption if the Lokpal is not there.
What are they afraid of? Why
No,
don't
no.
they allow a Lokpal
Seher,
to...
there's something
Okay,
very important that you're missing in this
Preeti
debate.
has up
announced a zero
one person at a time, please.
corruption.
Mohammed, the Congress in Punjab has not set
Yes,
a Lokayukta. And you have AAP being there sitting as LOP, both of you not being able
Okay.
to. Mohammed, respond to at least your Congress-led states not appointing a
Okay.
Lokayukta.
Well, first of all, I would say
And
this.
Mohammed acting sanctimonious about the tenets of the
case that
Lokpal
you're trying
is
to
really,
make
really
is
absurd.
unfounded because in
Preeti,
several
let,
of the
let,
states-
let him answer. This question is not for you,
Preeti
please,
ji,
Preeti.
No. Preeti ji, if I can respond
I'm
to you.
sorry, this is
let
not
me
done,
answer. I
Preeti.
didn't interrupt you while you were
Yeah,
speaking.
Mohammed,
Why
please
aap
go
baukhla
ahead.
kyun rahi hain? Why are you getting nervous? I didn't interrupt you. I didn't
All
interrupt
right,
you, Preeti
okay,
ji.
yeah.
Now see this. I'll say this simply.
Go
First
ahead,
of all,
Mohammed.
okay, the only party that based its politics on sanctimony and falsehoods was the Aam Aadmi Party. You acted as the B team of the BJP, and that's why they're in power today. They used you for their agenda. Whether you did it wittingly or unwittingly, history will abide. But I will simply say this. Look, Seher, you cannot level any corruption allegations of the Congress or the charge of weakening institutions. If there isn't a Lokayuk, we will set it up. But let me tell you that in most of the states where a Lokayuk has been set up, it is a Congress government that has set it up. You remember Mr. Hegde's Lokayukt in Karnataka? And if a Lokayukt has been undermined in functioning, it is because of the BJP. Now I'll say one more thing. You kept telling us about the Lokpal. Because this debate is about the Lokpal, let's stay on point. You kept talking to us about the Lokpal. Did we or did we not enact it? Did we or did
No,
we
it's
not
about
get
the
it presidential assent? Did we or did we not bring it in as the demands of the people stood? No, the Lokpal and the Lokayuks Act are equally important. And we have done it and we will continue to do it.
Right.
But the truth is, this became a political agenda and a political tool. And let me tell you something. Preeti ji accuses our party of corruption. Madam 2G, which you lied to the public about, it has been dismissed by the trial court. No evidence was found against our leaders. You lied to the people for you to establish your fledgling political party. The BJP used you. And unfortunately, we will not fall prey to these games again.
This is the most funniest thing I'm hearing. The party Congress is under corruption of 12 lakh crores. And they are talking about the corruption.
All right. So this is exactly what it comes down to. This is exactly what it comes down to, a political blame game here. Final word, Vinay. Vinay, if we have the government of the day, getting in a better perspective, Vinay, final question here to you. If we have the government of the day here saying that there is zero corruption in their government for the past 4.5 years here, do we just take this on face value? Do we have no other option of cross-checking that or scrutinizing that then?
No, of course we can't take any government at face value because which government will come out and say, oh, we have problems? I mean, nobody will. The Congress claims there was no problem. Between 2010 and 14, the evidence is the contrary. The question is this, Seher. Look, every state... Jammu and Kashmir and Uttarakhand have questioned the very fundamental of Lokayukt. West Bengal government amended the law to remove the CM from its post. Orissa doesn't want to bring it in. Karnataka has brought in another act which dilutes the power of the Lokayukt. Maharashtra Lokayukt has a Lokayukt, but it doesn't have any police to investigate their cases. There is grand unanimity in the political class. There is absolutely no matter what they may say on our show tonight, the fact of the matter is there is complete unanimity that all of them are squeamish because you never know who's going to come to power next. If you pass a very strong law, it may come back to bite you tomorrow.
Okay. Right. All right, we'll have to leave it at that. Many thanks to all our panelists here for sharing their views. But at the end of the day, this should be seen as a case of failing the people again, especially when you talk about the Lokpal law, because it was a people's movement. No one's forgotten the agitation of 2011. A lot of us across cities were on the streets fighting for this strong anti-corruption law here to get in that transparency in the system. But we don't see that happening. The state government, the central government has not done so, despite this being our struggle that we participated in. And tonight, it is what the Supreme Court has also made it very clear that this is a fine piece of legislation that exists, and this delay by the government or any government henceforth is unfair. We're going to be leaving you with those views, and also a very final reminder here for each of our viewers, and this is as per a compulsory TRAI tariff order. If you want to continue watching us, the news on Mirror Now, you'll have to call up your DTH or cable TV operator here and ask to get the Times Network Value Pack. Thanks for being with us. Good night.